This video is an overview of Grays as a sea fishing venue based on my experiences during summer 2021. It covers a full stretch and the marks I've fished with highlights from 5 different sessions. Locals may well disagree, but I found it hasn't fished that well this summer. However, this video should still give an indication of what the venue is like. The pan view at the opening of this video is from the Tilbury end of the venue. I'll be using Google Earth to locate the areas I've fished on this part of the Thames Estuary. Grays is on the north side of the river, 23 miles east of central London, and close to other notable venues which I've covered in other videos. For the purpose of this video, I'm dividing the venue into 3 sections. The first of these is between the Grays Terminal Jetty and Wharf Yacht Club, principally Grays Beach. The second is between the Yacht Club and the Wharf pub, with a couple of low water marks, then Grays Wharf and Jetty No. 2 in the west. Currently you can't fish by the Grays Terminal since the path is closed as they're knocking down the old silos and replacing them with new ones. Fishing in front of the flour mills is pretty similar to that as fishing the Grays Beach itself, which I prefer since it's less of a walk. To fish here I've been parking in Curzon Drive, which is to the north of Riverside Park, since there's a virus testing centre taking up half of a car park behind the yacht club, which is where I'd normally park for the mark I've fished here. This footage shows the area walking through in order to fish behind the old broken sea wall. You could use a trolley to get to the beach if you don't mind negotiating the steps over the new sea wall. From the park you turn left if you want to fish closer to the grain terminal. Concrete over this outfall is useful if you want to return fish when the tide is partly out, which I've had to do before when fishing the ebb right down. Panning to the right shows a stretch I've been mainly fishing, and I've placed a link to a previous video which covers 3 sessions here. For this video I fished a session towards the end of this broken sea wall, closer to the yacht club. As with most of my sessions at Grays, I'm trying to catch flat fish, so the rigs I use are with that in mind. Typically boom rigs, but sometimes short snood clip down rigs. In the summer, ragworm seems to be the best bait, but I'll also bring along some lugworm. In my opinion, the smaller the bait the better, particularly if you want to catch soles. However, this summer it's not been that good for them compared with previous years. So, onto the session, with a finger stall coming on for distance casting. My setup is with continental rods, with fixed ball reels and braid. This is personal choice since I like to see every little knock and determine which ones to hit or not. A simple overhead thump can get you just short of moored boats, although you don't really need to cast that far. Having said that, I haven't caught many fish closer in. I've arrived an hour before the top of the tide and I've set up on a grass bank which has got some salt marsh plants amongst it. That should have given me a clue that this area is likely to flood on a bigger spring tide, which this is an example of. Tidal pull isn't as strong here as it is further west in Grays, and generally there isn't a problem with floating weed, except sometimes on the ebb. On the flood you can get away without using leads with wires, and this helps if you want to drag your baits. I will use wires however if a tidal pull is stronger than normal, and this goes on the rig which is used up tide. It can pull quite hard and out into the ebb, and that's when I'll change over to having both rigs with leads with wires. The water's now covered the top of the broken sea wall and I'll get my first bite. I nudged the rig, hoping that the fish will take it more confidently. I should, however, be a bit more aware of the impending wake due to a passing ship. This has caught me a bit by surprise, so I try and concentrate on developing the bite and hitting the bite. Luckily, I moved my clothing just in time. fish decides to take the bait properly. Not sure that was worth getting my feet wet for. However, it is a flatfish, a small flounder. I move my gear back a little bit as the tide is still rising, then I get my second bite. Unfortunately, the fish comes off on the way in. I get my next bite right at the top of the tide. It's another flounder, marginally bigger than the first one. Tide has now started to ebb, so I can readjust my gear a bit. As the sea wall becomes exposed, I get flounder number 3. Flounder. The orange spots on this one confuses me a bit. Might be a place.
What?
I think it's a place.
One picture. Bye.
Hey?
One picture, please.
You want a picture? Hang on.
One picture.
Yeah, go on.
Okay. Kalkan.
Running my finger along the scales of its lateral line proves it's not a place. It's a flounder. A picture for the record as my newfound friend examines my bait and rig. Ragworm, yeah.
My Romania.
Yeah, I thought this was, it could have been a place. Looks like a place, but yeah, there's spots, but it's got rough. That's rough there.
Yeah.
My next bite, and the fish feels a bit different. I thought it was a bit better, but it's only small schooling. That fish was followed by an eel and another flounder. Overall, a reasonable and typical session for this stretch, where flounders seem to dominate your catch. Moving west from the yacht club, there's a concrete platform just before you get to town wharf. There's free parking off Argent Street west of the wharf. Elsewhere, it's for residents only or paid parking off Thames Road. Blue badge owners can however park for free in Thames Road, and there's good access to this mark for wheelchair bound anglers. This was pretty short and uneventful session for me, fishing from the top of a tide to about an hour and a half down. Bite on the right hand rod where I've been casting towards a patch of gravel. Unfortunately, I missed that one. There seems to be more crab activity here than at Grays Beach, requiring more rebaiting. As you can see, it's comfortable fishing here with your rods propped up on railings and you're not going to get your feet wet. My left hand rod has been cast straight in front of me onto mud. However, I'm casting my other rod to the right to try and get to the end of that patch of gravel. One good thing about this mark is that it seems to be snag free. Unfortunately, this session didn't produce anything for me, nor the other angler, but I will be back to give it another go. The patch of gravel I've been casting towards juts out from left hand side of Town Wharf. It's exposed at low tide and can be fished from, but yet to give that a go. Moving west, you can fish from in front of the flats before and after Columbia Wharf. I don't know this area, but I have been encouraged to fish at low tide from the next patch of gravel. This extends from just in front of the flats before the Wharf car park to the wharf itself. There's a couple of ladders you can use to get down the seawall to fish its low water mark. I was a bit sceptical about this session, but got down here dead on low water to fish it on the way up. The white building is the Wharf pub itself. Boom rigs are being cast out again with souls in mind. The tide comes in quite quickly here, and there isn't a notable slope, so I move my gear quite a distance away from where it is. The ground is quite comfortable to walk on, although there are patches of weed. Whilst making this move, I see the first sign of life. There seem to be a few larger fish on the inside as the tide is flooding in. It can't be 6 inches deep, and the fish are topping no more than about a couple of yards out. I'm sure this is not the right gear to try and catch them, but nevertheless, I'm having a go. The activity isn't there for that long. I'm not sure whether they're bass or marlet. Needless to say, I didn't get a bite from any of them, but at least I know for next time. I'll come a bit more prepared for that. Back to casting at distance. Due to the crab activity, I'm down to fishing one rod at a time now. My bait is getting stripped really quickly, so as one rod is fishing, I'm baiting up the other one. So far, I've not had a bite. Well, that session ended up biteless and fishless, but I will give it another try. Next time, I'll try and fish the tide down and over low water, and I'll probably fish it just an hour up, hoping that those fish that I saw down the inside might be there again. I will bring the right gear for that though. On to the last section, the western part of Grays, with the famous Grays Wharf itself, and then down to Grays Jetty No. 2. Grays Wharf is the most regularly fished part of this venue. I particularly enjoy fishing this mark and have produced a previous video on it. A link to that is in the top right hand corner. Here I'm fishing towards the western end, where in the past I've had some really good sessions with plenty of soles over high water. Best of these resulting in 11 soles, with 9 of them being sizable. That was a few years back though, before they started work on the London Gateway port. Here I'm using a typical 3-rod setup with boom rigs. I tried to get here about 3/4 of an hour before the top of the tide, but I'm a bit late today, and I get a bite straight away, but unfortunately I missed that. Typically I'll fish ragworm on the upper two hooks and lugworm on the bottom one. Two rods are cast at distance and my third is cast slightly shorter. This one has a rig with slightly larger hooks, size 2, with bigger worm baits just in case there are bass about. A similar sharp knock to the first bite. Fortunately I hit this one. Not the biggest bass I've had from here, but that will do. It's got me off a mark on this session, and I know this area's not been fishing that well. Fish number 2, and it's a bootlace eel. Another pretty quiet session, and the fact that there's only one other angler fishing here tells you what it's been like. I do get one more fish though, and it's the bigger bait. This half decent flounder has taken liking to the bigger lugworm. Although I really like Grays Wharf, I've tended to avoid it this summer since it's been fishing quite poor. Moving on to the last spot that I've fished, and that's Grays Jetty No. 2. I have produced a video which covers 3 other sessions here, and a link to that is in the top right hand corner. Sessions here have been rather frustrating due to the number of lost fish. Here I'm just showing a brief part of a session from the middle part of this mark. On this occasion there's no tanker moored up to the jetty unloading. To increase the number of hookups, you need sharp points to your hooks. Here I'm fishing over some rocks, and your hooks do get blunt, so I'm changing them. It also pays to have slightly stronger hook lengths, so here I'm using 10-pound Maxima rather than my normal 8-pound fluorocarbon, and I'm using size 4 Aberdeens rather than size 3 Nordic bend hooks, which do bend, and that's a bit of a problem if you're trying to pull fish out from where there's snags. Unlike Grays Beach, the tidal pull here is strong, both on the flood and the ebb. The first bite comes as the tide starts slackening off towards the top. It's a tiny pootlay seal, of which there seems to be quite a lot here. This one's very lively and a bit of a handful, not to mention slippery. This session ended up with 4 more eels and 2 half-decent bass. Unfortunately, I couldn't film the capture of those bass, and I did lose 2 more. There is, however, a photo of one of them at the end. So, to sum up, Grays is a pretty decent summer venue. However, it hasn't fished well for me this year, with a distinct lack of soles. There seems to be a slight increase in the number of flounders, particularly in the eastern part, and a good number of bass and eels towards the west. It just remains to be seen if there's going to be any sign of a codling run this winter.